Some people don't react. Not because they're empty, not because they don't care. It's just that their emotions don't respond on demand. You can tell them something big, and they stay still. You can show them something painful, and they look calm. And from the outside, it can seem like nothing is happening. But something is happening. For some people, emotion isn't a spark, it's pressure. It builds quietly, it waits, and it doesn't show itself when it would be convenient. It shows up later, sometimes much later. And when it finally does, it can hit you like a wave you didn't see coming. Because they didn't feel nothing. They felt it all. Just not yet. Most people assume this kind of calm means distance, or strength, or sometimes a lack of depth. But that assumption is wrong. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why. Because this pattern isn't accidental. Not just what this pattern looks like, but why it exists. You'll understand why some people can move through life looking untouched while carrying more than anyone realizes. Why their emotions stay quiet when others expect a reaction. And why, when the moment finally arrives, everything comes at once. This isn't about control, and it isn't about avoidance. It's about timing, and about a system that was never designed to perform on command. Because for some people, emotional silence isn't emptiness, it's protection. And once you see what it protects, the whole picture changes. I used to believe this too, that if someone didn't react, it meant they didn't feel much. When someone stayed calm during moments that clearly mattered, I assumed something was missing. And when I was the one staying quiet, I wondered the same thing about myself. Because we're taught a very simple equation. If you feel something, you show it. If you don't show it, it must not be there. That logic feels natural. It's neat, and it's wrong. Over time, I started noticing something that didn't fit. The people who reacted the least in the morning were often the ones who carried things the longest. They remembered conversations others forgot. They replayed moments that everyone else had already moved past. And sometimes, years later, something small would open the door. Not a dramatic event, not a crisis, just a sentence, a memory, a quiet realization. And suddenly, all that calm didn't look like emptiness anymore. It looked like delay. Because emotional systems don't work on volume, they work on timing. And once I understood that, the way I saw quiet people, including myself, completely changed. It took me a long time to realize this. Emotions aren't a switch. You don't press them. You don't schedule them. And for some people, they don't even show up when it would make sense. What I've noticed, in myself and in others, is that some emotional systems are built to store, not release. They don't respond to the moment. They respond to meaning. But what happens when meaning takes years to arrive? For a while, I thought that meant something was wrong with me. Like I was behind. Like I was missing something everyone else seemed to have. I tried to react faster. I tried to feel on time. And the more I forced it, the more unnatural it felt. Because emotional systems don't care about what looks normal. They care about what's real. That's why nothing seems to happen when everyone expects a reaction. The system is still deciding whether the moment is meaningful or just loud. I think of it like pressure behind a closed door. Nothing leaks, nothing rattles. From the outside, it looks solid. But inside, things are being measured, filtered, weighed carefully. Not because the person is cold, but because once that door opens, it doesn't close easily. So the system waits. It waits until the emotion has somewhere to go, until it matters enough to change something, until reacting won't just be noise. That's why trying to pull emotion out of someone like this never works. You can't rush meaning, and you can't force depth to perform on cue. This isn't emotional avoidance, it's emotional precision, and it explains something important. Why silence doesn't mean absence, and why calm doesn't mean nothing is happening. Because sometimes the emotion isn't late. It's waiting for the one moment it can't ignore. And then, eventually, something happens. Not the kind of moment people expect. Not a crisis. Not a loud turning point. Usually, it's something small. A sentence said the wrong way. A look that lasts half a second too long. A realization that arrives quietly, without warning. And that's when the system finally decides this matters. From the outside, it can look sudden, like an overreaction, like something that came out of nowhere. But it didn't. It was building while everything looked calm, while life moved on, while everyone assumed nothing had left a mark. What most people don't see is the cost of that silence. Sometimes the cost is time, conversations that never happened, words that stayed inside too long, moments where something could have been said, but wasn't. Not because it didn't matter, but because the feeling wasn't ready yet. Some people feel immediately. They react, release, and move on. Others wait. And that waiting can look like distance, even when it's actually restraint. I've seen this happen in myself. Years of quiet acceptance, followed by a single moment that opens everything at once. And the intensity surprises everyone, sometimes even the person feeling it. Because when emotions are stored instead of released, they don't fade. They wait. And when they finally move, they move with purpose. That's why these reactions don't look messy. They look final. Not loud, not chaotic, just certain. And once it happens, there's no going back to the version of yourself that didn't know. Because the emotion didn't show up to be felt. It showed up to change something. For a long time, I thought this pattern meant something was wrong with me. That I was slow, or distant, or emotionally behind everyone else. Because when the world reacts quickly, quiet looks like a defect. But it isn't. What I eventually understood is that this isn't a weakness. It's a structure. And if you recognize yourself here, this was never something you needed to overcome. Some people are built to respond fast. Others are built to respond accurately. One isn't better than the other, they just serve different purposes. This kind of emotional system doesn't waste energy on every signal. It listens, it filters, it waits until the signal is real. That's why the silence lasts so long. And that's why, when it breaks, it doesn't break halfway. There's a clarity that comes with it, a sense of finality. Not because the emotion is stronger, but because it's been fully processed before it ever shows itself. Once I stopped trying to force reactions out of myself, something shifted. I stopped apologizing for being calm. I stopped explaining why I wasn't reacting yet. And instead of asking, why don't I feel this now? I started asking, what am I waiting to understand? That question didn't make me colder. It made me honest. The word people use most often for this is unemotional, and it's almost always wrong. But that word never sat right with me, because nothing about this experience feels empty. If anything, it feels heavy. Quiet people aren't missing emotion. They're holding it. What looks like distance is often depth. What looks like calm is often restraint. Over time, I noticed something else. People like this don't feel less. They feel slower, deeper, and longer. Their emotions don't burn fast and disappear. They settle. They stay. And that's why they're careful. Careful with words. Careful with reactions. Careful with moments that can't be undone. Because once something is felt fully, it leaves a mark. So the system protects itself. Not by shutting down, but by waiting. Waiting until feeling something won't just pass through, but actually change something. And when you understand that, silence stops looking like absence. It starts looking like intention. If this felt familiar, there's nothing wrong with you. You don't need to react faster. You don't need to prove that you care. And you don't need to explain your silence to people who measure feeling by volume. Some emotions arrive early. Others arrive only when they're ready to change something. And if yours take their time, that doesn't make them weaker. It makes them deliberate. Some people feel first and understand later. Others understand first and feel only when it finally matters. If this perspective helped you to see yourself a little more clearly, you're welcome to stay. Not to fix anything, just to understand better. And if you know someone who's often misunderstood for being too calm, this might help them feel less alone.